I think the next broad theme of conversation that I wanted to talk about with you is about your decision to do an MBA abroad. I think there are two parts to it, like doing an MBA and doing it abroad. Again, like a huge conversation on its own. But yeah, I think this is again a bit of a controversial thing, right? So because every time I kind of talk to my dad's friends, they'll ask me this question: what do you want to do 5 years down the line? Do you want to like leave India? Do you want to stay in India? Are you on Desh Bhakt? All of those things. And I've always been thinking about this, and I have like my point of view. But I would love to know your point of view on how you made that decision of like leaving India and going abroad and like doing an MBA. Yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Adi, unlike you, I'm not very planned in life. So for me, there were some decisions that were pre-planned. An MBA abroad was one of those pre-planned decisions by my parents, right? Neither did I choose the place that I wanted to go to, the country, nor did I choose the time at which I wanted to leave. Right? It was all decided by my parents, and I gave into that offer because only if I gave into that offer about going for an MBA 3 years after I start working, will they let me do my startup? So that was our kind of exchange. So they agreed to have me let me quit such a big company and come back home and start a small startup within my own room, in the house that they hosted me in, right? So, and kind of my dad was partially my seed investor towards second phase of my startup before I got external funding instead. But their side of the commitment they upheld. So my side of the commitment I have upheld, and I applied after 3 years of experience. I didn't really think through these choices. I did apply to a few schools in India, like SP Jain College, like ISB, and then I forget the other ones. But I got admission at all of these colleges. And then I also got admission at US. My parents are more like in the South Indian parents. They're like, go abroad, blah, blah. It happened. I think I'm not the right person to comment on making the decision between staying in India versus abroad. But definitely, if you're not going to get distracted by the lifestyle of a foreign nation, and if you're not going to get distracted by what Hollywood has to talk about a foreign country, if you really have it in your heart to give back to your nation, then it is possible for you to do a foreign MBA, which is definitely much better in quality compared to an Indian MBA, and come back in India. This whole myth about how will I come back to India after a foreign MBA and not be able to pay my education loans is kind of a very old tale. I think it's very much possible. I know many of my classmates, in fact, 40 people in my class went back to their home countries after finishing their MBA in the US. And they are doing well. They're earning extremely high wages in companies in their own countries. So it is not magic. Maybe for our previous generation, when our parents are baby boomers, making the decision to return from a reverse brain drain from a country, go back to India and settle themselves was a difficult choice because of the huge income gap, because of their extremely high saving potential in the US and all of that stuff. But in our generation, I think that the tides have turned. We are not first generation engineers, at least most of us. I mean, of course, I'm generalizing right now. We're not first generation engineers. So if our parents are able to have some kind of a risk net for themselves, we are very much in a position to come back to India after our whatever careers in the US and be in an extremely good job, very, very strong strategic role, because you can now sell to a US client sitting in India and be extremely successful. So I have numerous examples of people who have reverse brain drained in our generation and made it a reality. So I guess it's less about where do you want to do an MBA. People talk about ROI and all that bullshit. I think it's more about where is your heart. Do you really want to aspire for a lifestyle that's shown on television, or are you comfortable watching Family Man instead of Friends? So
No, it's a nice analogy. So I think like if I were to answer that question, right, like deciding to go abroad, I'm not really sure whether like my thoughts are right, but I just kind of feel that the previous generation was like very different, like when they had to decide staying in India, going abroad. But at least our generation or my generation, I don't know. Like the thing is that like with globalization and everything coming, there are a lot of global problems that are coming out. Like we can't just sit in India and kind of look at all of these issues, and not any single country can solve the problems on their own. So I kind of feel that doing like an international degree gives you that diverse perspectives, that cross-cultural experience, like irrespective of whether you're staying in that country or like coming back to India. I think that exposure would like definitely help, right? So so you have two different experiences. You doing your MBA from Babson College, and also like working in the United States. So, do you feel so? What is like culturally? What is the difference? Like, be it education or like the work culture, what is the difference between like India and let's say US? And what do you think that college students at NIT Trichy or any of the most like the premier engineering colleges or any college for that matter can they do differently?
uh, oh my God, I've thought so much about this question. I'm just going to stick to a few things that people would love to listen to. First thing is work ethic. And I'll give you an example of what work ethic is, as how simple it is. Whenever in India, I used to take a holiday, or come back after a break and have to convince someone that it was reasonable for me to take that break, I will come up with this huge story. I'll be like, I had to go this extreme thing happened. I had to come back, and it's almost a hero story for just a single day of absence. And unless you have that huge story behind your sorry, people don't accept it. People think you're being rude and arrogant, all of that stuff. In the US, there's no such bullshit. You cut to the chase and you say apologies. Nobody says sorry, at least in corporate environment. Apologies, this happened. I'll make up for it. So you're more solution oriented than you are excuse oriented. In terms of like the magnitude of the mistake that you did, instead of that, you're talking about what is the fastest way you can resolve it. So there are very subtle things like these that are work culture issues that we do not get trained in, and it becomes a disaster when that's why when our colleagues, I'm in a strategy consulting firm, and naturally there are a lot of Indians in the analytics divisions or data science divisions of our strategy consulting firm. When you look at them having a very different work culture and ethos, you see this difference. Like clearly, we're not able to grow up the ladder as much as a white American or somebody who's a Indian who's grown up in the US, because they are well versed with the work culture over here. So work culture is a huge difference. It's so many subtle things that we need to learn in order to improvise ourselves. Many of us adopt the work culture of our bosses. And that's not the best strategy to go about, because they themselves must be learning it from other people who are taking it up. So try to use books as a way to expose you to good work culture. Try to expose yourself to work culture through other means. And do not rely on the single source person who's your boss and assume that you can be him after he leaves. Just like, today's daughter-in-laws try to become tomorrow's mother-in-laws and are rude and arrogant. Don't try to do that in corporate life. It doesn't work. That's one huge difference. The other big difference I see between US and India is, at least in corporate life, is that there's a very clear line between personal and professional choices. And nobody will judge you or excuse you or assess you based on what you do in your personal life. You can be a single dad with another affair. You can have 2 children and 4 pets. You can have all the things that can go wrong in somebody's life, and then still come back to office. But you will be judged from the time that you enter the office and the work that you produce. So that freedom of not being judged for everything else that you are, the caste that you represent, the religion that you are, the kind of hardships that you take on, that's excess sympathy that comes from the personal things that stay outside of office, inside office, all of that bullshit is cut. So you can get right into it, work, and let your work speak for itself. That's a huge cultural difference between India and the US, which I've always felt. I myself used to, in my own startup, bias against certain employees because they had single parents, or they had very difficult circumstances where they had to pay back the loans or get their sisters married, right? So these guys I was more considerate about. These guys I thought it's okay for them to work less. So I was actively thinking about them like a nursery school. Like, oh, is your parents sick? Okay, I'm not going to let you inside school today. Something like that. Like my sister called my startup a nursery school. I shouldn't have been that way. I should have been objective. I don't care who you are, drop that behind you. But when you take your shoes off and step into the office, you are right now this particular employee. And unless you perform well in that function, everything else topples. So I think that's why a lot of entrepreneurs who are reverse brain drain graduates from US, they go back and they start up in India. I think they're really successful because they figured out this work culture issue, and it translates into several things.